President Trump has some choice words for Fed Chair Jerome Powell. The president took to Truth Social to rail against Powell, who he notably hired, after he warned of the economic effects of Trump's tariffs. Too late, Jerome Powell of the Fed, who's always too late and wrong, yesterday issued a report which was another and typical complete mess. He added, too late, should have lowered interest rates like the ECB long ago, but he should certainly lower them now. Powell's termination cannot come fast enough.
Markets sagged Wednesday after Powell warned of stagflation risks facing the economy. Let's watch.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated, and the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. Both survey and market-based measures of near-term inflation expectations have moved up significantly, with survey participants pointing to tariffs. Survey measures of longer-term inflation expectations, for the most part, appear to remain well anchored as well.
The president is putting pressure on the Fed to speed up its planned interest rate cuts to ease the pressure on the economy amid ongoing concerns for his tariff plan. Political commentator Brian Krasenstein writes on X, he's demanding rate cuts while pouring gasoline on inflation.
Others on X are agreeing with Trump. Screenwriter Colette Harrington writes, why is the human money printer still around? Jerome Powell refuses to lower interest rates like he did to bail out Biden. Can Powell be fired?
A good discussion about monetary policy, Robby. That always brings the viewers in.
The most fascinating subject of all. Well, people of my ideological bent will say that it is not Jerome Powell that's the problem, but the Federal Reserve System itself. Ron Paul, my intellectual
I knew Ron was about to get a glowing mention.
Has actually, I saw he had some commentary recently saying it's not, the question shouldn't be who should have more power over this, Trump or Jerome Powell. It's the institution of the Fed. Libertarians of Ron Paul's ilk. And by the way, I should say I'm not an expert on this and perhaps not the even best articulator of this policy, but would say that the Federal Reserve itself is harming our economic interests, that printing money devalues our currency. That's what causes or leads to or contributes to inflation. So if you have that problem, you're always going to eventually have inflation.
So I am not expert enough on the debate about whether the Fed, the abolish the Fed argument. That gets into esoteric theories that I just don't know enough about. But the point is the Fed does exist and it does have independence, and Trump is naturally enough trying to trample on that independence, as we noted in the introduction, against a Fed chair who he himself appointed back in 2017. Now, setting aside that argument about the existence or non-existence of the Fed, there is a very, very good reason why it's independent, which is that you don't want monetary policy set according to electoral timetables. And in relation to what Powell said in the clip that we played, this is not really disputed by anybody outside the hardcore Trump MAGA world. You and I have talked about the tariffs and the fact that they do indeed obviously raise inflationary risks. That is the nature of tariffs. You, I think, would and have made the argument that a tariff is a tax, and when you tax things, you get less of those things, so it is injurious to trade, generally speaking, and therefore has the capacity to slow growth. So when Powell talks about a survey that the Fed has conducted there, essentially showing a bigger risk of stagflation, that's true, and Trump just doesn't want to hear it, it seems to me.
Yeah, I'm no fan of the tariff policy, and so here I'm not particularly sympathetic to what Trump is saying. Trump announced a policy that was clearly going to hurt the economy in the short term. The market reacted very negatively. The business community reacted very negatively. The advisors he surrounded himself with clearly don't actually like the policy, from Scott Bessent to Marco Rubio to everyone else. Republicans in his own party don't like it. No one likes it except Peter Navarro, who, as I explained in a previous Radar, is some kind of weird degrowth leftist from the 90s.
Steve Bannon quite likes it, but I don't know that.
I would also describe him as a kind he's also, did you hear Steve Bannon's whole rant recently about we need higher taxes on, again, it's your kind of stuff. Higher taxes on the wealthy. This is just leftism. We did not elect Trump to have leftism, I would say. You can think those ideas are good, but they're not Republican or conservative ideas.
That is true.
I don't know why we should be pushing them. So it was very clear. And also the tariffs, unlike other things that, open to the argument the Republican elites have ignored, what the base or what MAGA or what the voters actually want. I think that's been true on foreign policy. I think that was true on immigration. I think there are various subjects you could say that where maybe I agree with the elites, maybe I don't agree with them. On foreign policy, I really don't agree with them. I agree with the people. On some of this other stuff, it goes the other way. The tariffs, though, are not something really that some people in the base are demanding, but for the most part are not demanding. They don't poll well, even among all Trump. We keep talking about how so many Trump policies are 80-20 policies on deporting more immigrants or keeping men out of women's sports. The tariffs, people understand, raises the price of goods immediately, and they don't really understand why they're necessary. You can make separate arguments for tariff for China, for national security reason. You can say, well, if other countries are going to tariff us, we're going to do this in ways to negotiate the removal of the tariff, the trade barriers. That is basically what Trump's team adopted. That's not actually what Peter Navarro wanted. Peter Navarro wanted these permanent far-reaching tariffs. So that's a long way of saying, yes, the damage is what, to the economy, is what everyone said was going to happen, and so it's not really surprising, and I don't think you should pass the blame to Jerome Powell, even if I'm not really a fan of the Federal Reserve at all, and I think they cause a lot of economic harm.
Well, in this case, Jerome Powell is simply stating the economic realities. Now, there is, of course, a separate argument to be made about tariffs, and to your point, there has been very confusing not only messaging, but I think the policy itself is very confusing, because does Trump want the long-term tariffs that purportedly reignite rebirth of American industry, or is it a negotiating tactic? I mean, I agree.
Absolutely fantasy. It's not going to happen.
Exactly. It's not going to happen for all sorts of reasons, including much, much, much lower labor costs in various overseas markets, and the fact that you just can't disentangle the world anymore in the way that he seems to think you can. I mean, it just isn't plausible to have these nation states operating completely discreetly, uninfluenced by the other. It's just never going to happen. Anyway, the point is, Jerome Powell has independence. That should be respected. It is important that he has it, and Trump is trying to erode it.
Next up on Rising, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson of Michigan is here to describe what's going on in the state. Her efforts to run for governor is what she's expecting to do. We'll discuss with her coming up next.